Creature Commandos was back again this Boxing Day on Max for a brand new episode entitled The Iron Pot. Now, I'm your holly jolly host, Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, while also shouting out any comic book Easter eggs or references I can find. So, with that out of the way, let's get to it, shall we? So then, as we join the episode proper, Flag and Frank are still doing their whole comedically mismatched buddy cop thing, attempting to save the Princess of Pokolistan before she can be assassinated by the rest of the Commandos team. With all attempts at direct communication failing, Flag hopes to discredit Dr. McPherson, the Amazon expert we met last week, who is indeed acting pretty damn unprofessional as the episode begins, and if even someone like Frankenstein, a serial personal space invader, can see it, then you know there's gotta be a real problem here. Meanwhile, back with the bride and the others, they return to Pokolistan to fulfill Waller's kill order. Too bad for them, the Pokolistanis aren't stupid, and they're already beginning to clue in to what an allyship with the United States means. Friends one day until your enemies the next. Of course, the bride and her team don't really do a lot to dissuade suspicion. Then again, I guess that was always what the Flags brought to their teams, a level of legitimacy and the ability to lie through their teeth when it was called for. Now, as far as the flashback portion of this week's episodes go, this time around the focus is squarely on Frankenstein. We had seen some of Eric's origin already through the eyes of the bride, but this time we get to see what became of him after the laboratory fire. Musically, I also appreciate how they bring back a reprise of the Golgo Bordello song from episode 2. Turns out Frank managed to make it to the water, which put out the fire, but also washed him downstream. This is cool because if you know the original Mary Shelley version of Frankenstein, that story ended when the monster essentially drowned in icy water. Eric gets himself saved by a kindly blind medicine woman who not only nurses him back to health, but also ends up adopting him and giving him a place to stay while he recovers, and maybe also the chance to reevaluate how he sees the world, and particularly his quest to win the bride's heart. Frank continues to be his regular, grouchy, overly emotional self, though. He even throws around the G word at the lady with impunity, and even in the present too, just to really remind you that Frankenstein was never that nice, either in the past or now. In fact, probably the only things that keep Frankenstein from being 100% detestable is the fact that A, he's pretty damn funny with David Harbour turning in one hell of a performance, and B, he's just so damn pathetic, needy, and overly emotional. It's like, why even waste the energy hating him? Now, back in the present, Flag and Frank decide to turn over the Doctor's house for clues. This serves as a great opportunity to show off a ton of Amazon artifacts, including a helmet very much like the ones that Wonder Woman and the other Amazons wear sometimes in the comics. Beyond that, I don't think there's any real big smoking guns or Easter eggs here unless I missed something. Eventually, Flag and Frank learn the dark truth that the real Dr. McPherson has been dead for a while now, meaning the one they've been dealing with was actually an imposter. This turn of event only lends further credence to Flag's initial theory that Circe's whole vision of doom might very well be part of a much bigger, more well-orchestrated supervillain conspiracy. And honestly, speaking of supervillains and conspiracy clues, those keep piling up as it turns out that the fake Dr. McPherson is actually Batman villain, famous shapeshifter, and fan of Mortal Kombat 1, Clayface in disguise. I like that working with Waller in a supervillain prison, of course Rick Flag knows exactly who Clayface is. Furthermore, you probably know by now, but Clayface in this episode was actually voiced by Alan Tudyk. And that's notable because Alan Tudyk also voices the Basil Karlo version of Clayface over on the Harley Quinn show. I don't think there's any important connections to be made here, it's just a fun bit of trivia. Also, in the comics, there's like a dozen different versions of Clayface and a Lady Clayface, and we don't actually know what version of Clayface this one is here in the episode. Though, if we keep doing the whole DC multiverse thing, I do think it would actually be pretty damn funny if Alan Tudyk ended up voicing all the different versions of Clayface across the multiverse. Flag and Frank try their best to make a stealthy escape, but a fight just cannot be avoided, and thank God for that, because this fight is great from start to finish. You can tell the animators had an absolute blast getting to render Clayface in all of his gloopy glory and what his inhuman biology and shifting form could mean for the actual choreography. Believe it or not, though, that's not even the biggest or most brutal action scene from this week's episode, as back in Pokolistan, once the military realizes the Commandos are here to kill the princess and not protect her, they launch a massive ambush. Not only is this battle incredibly brutal with a ton of blood and broken bones, but it also carries with it an extra level of tragedy, as it wasn't long ago the Commandos and these soldiers were all comrades in arms. Now they're killing each other without a second thought, only because people like Waller deemed it so. Once again, Dr. Phosphorus proves to be the commander Commandos' real MVP and #1 powerhouse by using his amazing powers to phase through a tank and leaving literal middle finger burns on his victims' dead bodies. I'd like to say that Phosphorus is easily the cruelest member of the team, as he seems to take so much joy in murder, but then again I'm also reminded we can't actually see the emotions on his face because he is a skeleton man, so maybe he is enjoying it, maybe he isn't. I do know he took his pants off before the fight started, like he didn't want to burn through them, which I thought was a nice little touch. And hey, while we're on the subject of cruelty, we see what became of Frankenstein and that nice idealistic life he built with his blind friend. Turns out it didn't last forever, as Frank could just not shake his obsession with the bride, even when a literal blind woman could tell him that the bride simply does not love him back, either in that way or any other way. Frank takes his leave, but on his way out the door, he murders the nice old woman who helped him with the iron pot of the title. Why? Because, well, he doesn't want her to be alone without him. Again, remember last week when I talked about the true measure of a monster, how it wasn't in the features, but in the actions, in greed and wickedness and violence? Well, now we have this scene right here that I think sums up that idea perfectly. Frank is a monster not because of how he looks, but because of how he acts, in the choices he makes and keeps making over the years, in his self-centered obsession and his inability to see the needs of anyone outside himself. Hell, even after Frankenstein saves the day by defeating Clayface using electricity, he's still too slow to help Flag as he lays broken and bleeding, as he still can only think about how the bride might feel about him when all of this is over. You know, there's a writing trope that I am absolutely convinced James Gunn was trying to dissect here with these scenes. It's called pet the dog, kick the dog. You've probably seen it before. When they want to show a characters being 100% evil, they'll do something good, usually like pet an animal or save an animal, or to show that they are 100% evil and unsavable, they'll kill an innocent animal. It's why I think it's so clever that after Frankenstein kills the nice old woman, he actually leaves with her dog, meaning that he is both petting the dog and kicking the dog simultaneously. It also really speaks to Frankenstein's own particular brand of psychosis. Of course, he would fall in love with the dog more than the woman because a dog will love you unconditionally, as it can't quite challenge Frankenstein on all the other different ways in which he sucks and is an actual monster. And I just think from a writing standpoint, that's incredibly clever and something worth talking about. And yeah, as the episode comes to an end, it's a super downer. The Commandos are scattered to the wind, being hunted by the princess. Flag is either dead or dying, and all hope seems to be lost. But how was the Iron Pot? In my estimation, really great. The show might be called Creature Commandos, but this episode had all the hallmarks of a classic Suicide Squad comic story that I love so much. Lots of intrigue, backstabbing, conspiracy work, skullduggery, and spycraft. It also ends up being another great character piece, showing exactly how different Frankenstein is from the other unfairly maligned members of the Commandos, like the Bride, Weasel, and even G.I. Robot. In fact, the takeaway here is that Frank is maligned for 100% valid reasons. He truly lives up to the word monster, and unless he's willing to actually try and look inward and change his actions, he always will. Beyond that, this one had great action, hilarious jokes. What more could you ask for? So until we meet again, everyone, this has been Cape Joel. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're having a great holiday, and I hope you join me again next week when we get to do this all over again.